Hello and welcome to this brief tutorial on how to install WordPress. Over the next few minutes, I'm going to show you the steps needed to install the WordPress content management system on your own domain or web server. As you already know, WordPress is a free, open-source software package that you can install on a web server to create a fully featured website that can be managed using just your web browser. WordPress is available for download from wordpress.org. Before we begin the install, there are a few things you'll need. To begin with, you'll need a good web hosting provider. Most web hosts provide shared space on a web server for less than $20 a month, and many providers include simple tools to install WordPress on your web server with just a few clicks. But in this video, we're going to cover the steps to manually install WordPress on your own web server. To do this, you'll also need four things. First of all, you'll need FTP access to your web server, which should have been provided to you by your web hosting provider. Second, you'll need an FTP client. This is a desktop application that enables you to copy and transfer files from your own computer to your web server. FileZilla and CyberDuck are a couple of free FTP clients for both PC and Mac. But in this video, I'll be using Transmit, one of the best FTP clients for Mac users. Third, you'll need a text editor like Notepad or TextEdit. And last, your web browser of choice. Chrome, Firefox, or Safari are best because they support all the latest HTML5 and CSS3 web standards. Internet Explorer does not. To install WordPress, we're essentially going to complete 5 steps. First, we'll download the latest version of WordPress from wordpress.org. Then, we'll upload those files to our web server using FTP. Third, we'll create a MySQL database and user for WordPress. Then, we'll need to configure WordPress to connect to our newly created database. And last, we'll complete the installation and set up our new website. So let's get started. First, let's download and unzip the latest version of the WordPress software from wordpress.org. When WordPress has finished downloading, I can switch to my Downloads folder and locate our newly downloaded .zip archive. I'll double-click the archive to expand it. And now we need to upload these files to our web server using our FTP client. I'll switch to my FTP client Transmit and locate the newly downloaded WordPress files. Then I'll enter the FTP credentials furnished by my web hosting provider and connect to the web server. Most FTP clients work in a similar manner. On the left-hand side are the files on our own computer, and on the right-hand side, the files on our web server. I'll simply select all the files on the left-hand side and then drag them to the right-hand side, which will begin copying our files to the web server. While our files are uploading to the web server, let's switch to our web hosting control panel. For this demo, we're using Bluehost as our web hosting provider, and they use the popular cPanel for account management. This may look a little different from your own web hosting control panel, but they all offer essentially the same functionality. Under the Database module, I'll click the MySQL Databases icon to create a new database for WordPress to use. WordPress doesn't store content in files, but rather in a database, and each page in your site is created dynamically by WordPress every time a visitor loads one of your pages. So now we've created a MySQL database, but we also need to create a MySQL user with permission to access and modify this database. It's a good idea to use a secure password generator if possible, and be sure to save these credentials in a safe place because we'll be using them again in a couple of steps. Now, before we leave this screen, we'll also need to add our newly created user to the database and ensure that this user has been granted permissions to modify our database. Now that our database is set up, we need to connect WordPress to our newly created database. Switching back to our FTP client, we see that our files have finished uploading. Now, WordPress looks for database details in a file named wp-config. So I'll rename the wp-config-sample.php file to simply wp-config. Then we'll open this config file in our favorite text editor and then fill in the database details that we created in the previous step. It's also a good idea to further secure your WordPress installation by entering unique phrases for each of these authentication keys. I'll copy the URL for the WordPress secret key generator and then switch to my web browser and paste that URL into a new tab. This tool automatically generates a random set of secure authentication keys we can use to further secure our WordPress installation. I'll copy these directly from the browser window and then switch back to my text editor and paste them into our WP config file. And that's it. Now I'll save and close this file. And finally, we're ready to run the WordPress installation script. I'll simply enter the site's web address in my web browser, and WordPress will kindly prompt us to fill out a few remaining details, including our site's title, an administrator username and password, and a primary email address. Now, don't lose these. You'll need them to log into the WordPress administration area. And that's it. WordPress is now installed on our web server, and we're ready to begin building our website. To access the WordPress administration panel and begin managing your site's content, simply type wp-admin at the end of your website's URL to pull up the login screen. Enter the admin username and password we chose earlier, and then click the Login button. Well, I hope this video has been helpful and that you're now ready to install WordPress on your own web server. Thanks for watching.